An orientation of the soul. We have hope because we are human beings with dignity, something that no oppressor can take away. Václav Havel is one of many people who lived for freedom and whose spirit fills this room today. We had a memorial service for him here in 2012. His friend, the late Cuban dissident Osvaldo Paya, is another such person, and we're pleased that his daughter Rosa Maria Paya will be part of the young activist discussion with His Holiness that will be moderated today by Brian Joseph after our two tributes, one to Tenzin Delek Rinpoche and the other to the Central Tibetan Administration. Among the many friends who are with us today, I want to recognize Chen Guangchen, the barefoot lawyer who fled China in 2012 and who remains, even in exile now, in the United States, who remains an important defender of human rights and civil rights in his native land. Chen Guangchen. And I also want to recognize Han Dongfang, who is the Chinese labor activist and trade union organizer who was once called the Lech Wałęsa of China. Han Dongfang. Wonderful. We're going to have a few introductory remarks, and the first is going to be delivered by Congressman Peter Roskam from Illinois, who co-chairs the House Democracy Partnership that strengthens parliaments in 16 partner countries around the world, and who is also a greatly valued member of the board of the National Endowment for Democracy. Congressman Peter Roskam.
Thank you very much, Carl. Your Holiness, it's a great honor to be with you today and to be among so many guests and colleagues who are gathered. And I think it's really interesting that there's a central theme here, and that is the power of democracy. We're in a season right now in our life together around the world where there are rising voices of authoritarianism that are making a false claim. And the voices of authoritarianism are saying, you know what? People and their choices and the decisions that they're making, they really don't matter. They're not that significant, and we know better, and we've got the power, and we're going to assert that power, and we're going to assert it in a way that we choose. We're at a time where we who recognize the falsity and the hollowness of that claim, we've got a responsibility. And our responsibility is to use our voices to say, no, that's not true. And we're in the presence of a great man. We're in a presence of somebody who has made that claim on behalf of the Tibetan people, but not only on behalf of the Tibetan people, on behalf of all people who make this claim and who are marinating in truth, essentially. And they know this to be true. Let me just tell you one quick story of an encounter I had last August. I was able to go to Jerusalem, and I had an opportunity to sit down with Natan Sharansky. Natan Sharansky, as you know, was one of the refuseniks who in the Soviet system refused to walk away from his Jewish faith. He insisted on practicing his faith, and he tells the story of when Ronald Reagan called the evil empire an evil empire. You remember, at that time, that was scandalous that Ronald Reagan said that. I mean, it was really outrageous that Ronald Reagan said that, and yet he said it. And if you read Sharansky's book, and I confirmed this with him personally, he said, when the truth was declared and he heard what the American president said, he knew it was the beginning of the end of the Soviet system. Why? Because truth was articulated at the highest levels. So we've got someone here in whose presence is articulating truth. That is, democracy matters. And it doesn't matter what the authoritarians say. It doesn't matter how they try to manipulate their story. It doesn't matter how they try to marginalize people. They are living a lie, and we're articulating the truth. So there's a great joy in that. But there's also a joy that should sober us. And that is to recognize that we have a unique, not only responsibility, but we've got a unique opportunity. So I'm really humbled to be here, actually. I'm humbled to be among people who have actually suffered. I've never suffered. I'm an American. I'm in my mid-50s. I've never suffered for freedom. And yet we're here in the presence of people who have been exiled, people who have lost parents, people who have suffered greatly. And you are a great example to all of us. So we're here to honor you. We're here to honor the memory, and we're here to treasure that memory. So thank you, Your Holiness, for the example that you are to all of us. And thank you to those who are bearing witness to the truth. Thank you.
Peter has a congressional markup, so he's going to have to leave us. But thank you very much, Peter, for being with us today. We're awaiting Speaker Pelosi, Leader Pelosi. She's not here yet. Aha, okay. Well, as we wait, I'm going to call upon Richard Gere, who at an event earlier this week called himself a student of the Dalai Lama. And he's one of the most prominent voices advocating for human rights in Tibet and the preservation of Tibetan culture. And he is the board chair of the International Campaign for Tibet. It's my pleasure to introduce Richard Gere.
I got bushwhacked here. I was told I was going to speak a few minutes ago. I think I see so many faces out here from other continents and other countries and other experiences. And I see clearly that we're all brothers and sisters in this. We're all looking for our home. I just made a movie called Time Out of Mind, and I've been presenting this movie around the world. And I just presented it in Sicily at the Taormina Film Festival. And I said, well, look, if we do that, I want to visit some of the camps, and one in particular in Lampedusa, which is the first stop for the boat people who survived the voyage from Libya to Europe. And not all of them make it, as we well know. But I was, and most of them all Africans, some from very far in south of Africa, spent months trying to find their way to Libya, hoping to find a boat that would get them to Sicily and be processed in some way that they would be allowed to go into Europe, and a life of safety, a life of security, a life where they and their families can live with hope and happiness and a sense of the future, sense of a creative, joyous, happy life for themselves and everyone around them. We all have that in common. I don't care who we are, what culture we come from. We want that home where we are secure and we can see a light. Now, obviously, with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we have an extraordinary light and an umbrella for all of us to live underneath. But it takes organizations like NED, and Carl, thank you so much for having this organization, where people can feel free to speak their minds, that there's an organization that has power and resources behind it, that means something when you speak here. The speakers that are here today, I met two of the young girls. One was a Uyghur and the other's from Cuba. And they were telling comments of violent people, troublemakers, who don't value their human and non-human brothers and sisters. It's not bad governments and says, no, we won't tolerate that. It is desperately important on this planet. So I just want to thank you, Carl, and everyone from this organization. I know I was so happy to see Chen Guanchen here and all of us here who have such extraordinary stories to tell and share with each other. It's the family that we create with each other is the power that we have. And there's a lot of power in this room, and the power that extends to friends.
Thank you, Richard. And I maybe will use this opportunity to recognize one other person who's a really key activist, Chinese activist for democracy, and that's Yang Li, who's just back from Dharamsala. We had an international human rights conference there. We're waiting for Leader Pelosi and Senator Dianne Feinstein, but we're going to go on with the program, and maybe we'll hear from them in between the two award ceremonies. And I mentioned before that I felt that like the spirit of Václav Havel was with us, and among the people whose spirit is also with us today is Tenzin Delek Rinpoche, and we now want to honor his memory. I first learned about the death of Tenzin Delek when Sikyong Lobsang Sangye reported the news at a luncheon in New York last July, honoring His Holiness the Dalai Lama on the occasion of his 80th birthday. The Sikyong said that they had literally just received word of what had happened in the car on the way to the hotel, a remarkable coincidence of events. The death of Tenzin Delek after 13 years in prison was a shock. But what happened immediately after his death was actually even more shocking. In violation of the family's wishes to carry out the traditional Buddhist rites, the police secretly cremated Tenzin Delek's body, presumably to destroy the evidence of how he had died. His ashes were subsequently seized at gunpoint and disposed of as they were being transported back to his hometown. His relatives were detained. Demonstrators protesting his death were beaten, and security measures throughout Tibetan communities were harshly intensified. At a memorial service for Tenzin Delek at the conclusion of the 49-day period of mourning, I asked a question that still cries out for an answer. What kind of government would commit such despicable and inhuman acts? It is a government that, in violation of the most basic international norms of human rights, considers the mere expression of Tibetan cultural and religious identity to be a criminal act. Since I am a Tibetan, Tenzin Delek said after he was arrested, I have always been sincere and devoted to the interests and well-being of the Tibetan people. That is the real reason why the Chinese do not like me and framed me. That is why they are going to take my precious life, even though I am innocent. And so they did take his life, his precious life. But they could not take his courage or his dignity or his devotion to the Tibetan people. The Chinese government, which aspires to be a stakeholder in the international system, but which violates its fundamental rules and principles, needs to know that Tenzin Delek will not be forgotten. He symbolizes the indomitable spirit of the Tibetan people inside Tibet, and especially the spirit of the 2,081 known Tibetan political prisoners in China. It is in remembering Tenzin Delek and in expressing those political prisoners and with the Tibetan people that I now call upon Geshe Jamyang Nyima, Tenzin Delek's cousin, translate for him, to join me as I read the tribute to Tenzin Delek and present him posthumously with the NED's Democracy Service Medal. Tenzin Delek Rinpoche was a beloved community leader and spiritual leader who devoted his life to the defense and well-being and identity of the people of Tibet. He worked to improve their health and education, establishing clinics and schools and homes for orphans and for the elderly in eastern Tibet. He fought to prevent the destruction of Tibet's fragile environment. He vehemently opposed mining that polluted rivers and poisoned the soil, condemned deforestation that led to flooding and soil erosion, and protested against indiscriminate hunting that led to the extinction of species. He was a leader and a role model in the struggle to preserve the unique culture and religion of Tibetan Buddhism. Because of his leadership and his popularity among the Tibetan people, Tenzin Delek was arrested in April 2002 and sentenced to death, a sentence that was later commuted to life imprisonment following protests by thousands of people around the world. Regarding the grotesquely false charge that he had engaged in bombings, he said, "I have always taught people that one should not harm any life, not even that of an ant. How could I possibly then be responsible for such an action?" Yet this peaceful and compassionate man, this revered leader, was repeatedly beaten and tortured in prison. His health deteriorated, but he was denied medical attention. He died on July 12th, 2015, and his family members who viewed the body before it was secretly cremated believe that he did not die a natural death. In life, Tenzin Delek was an inspiration to Tibetans. a living, breathing presence in our lives, in the words of one young Tibetan activist who was drawn to a life of human rights activism by the example of this brave and martyred man. In death, Tenzin Delek remains a moral force, a living symbol of Tibetans' indomitable spirit and their deeply rooted, invincible faith and identity. It is the obligation of civil society movements and people around the world committed to justice to remember Tenzin Delek and to stand in moral and political solidarity with the cause for which he gave his life. For his courage and devotion, for his service to his people, and for the goodness that he brought into this world and left as a legacy to the Tibetan people and to all mankind, the National Endowment for Democracy is proud to present its Democracy Service Medal posthumously to Tenzin Delek Rinpoche.
Ladan Jebi, going to Jenny, Zani Shidi Teban, Musa Jango Chambuchola, Gosang, Kushang Huntane, Teri Mansu Tezakangi, Sintan Zegu, Kundu Zu Musa Chodan, Pati Sichuan Cho, Adi Trizogi, Temi Namba, Mansu Tezakangi, Delishugu.
Tashidele, I would like to extend my heartfelt greetings to our beloved leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, our Prime Minister Sikyong Dr. Lobsang Sengye, members of the United States Congress, the staff and board of the National Endowment for Democracy, and all of you in the audience.
Tenzin Delek Rinpoche, Hasam Nanda ki Mamon la Sishu Dubaten, Nido Ni lo Dao Jibi Tseba Deni, Nyachu Zunto de, Jajun ki Manye Kayo, Zenzon dan Zunju She, Gao Te Du Kung ki Jungmusang ki Zu, Jinju Ba Tutsu Mambu Reku Dan, Shutu Nazo Shejang, Jajun ki Chenlu dan Mutembi Tone, Kung la Loni Dunjang ki Soten Jeba Dan, Jesu Adi Sijung ki Zu, Jeji Sijung Ka Dan, Jonde Mayimbi Tsoba Kaso Ji Neshu la Tene, Soten de Chejan de Jutu Yu, Longo Jusum Ji, Longo Mi Dao Dumbi, Tseba Juni Ni, Rando Tuchi Ringe To, and Gomba Zo Yu.
Tenzin Delek Rinpoche was a man who was fiercely loyal to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and devoutly followed His Holiness's principles of nonviolent action and public service. For this reason, he was arrested by Chinese authorities on April 7, 2002, and sentenced to death under false charges. Thousands of Tibetans, including his family, appealed for his release, as did many governments, including the United States, and activists around the world. His death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. After serving 13 years of his sentence, Rinpoche died in prison last July at age 65.
Rinpoche, Lo Chosong Lagiri, Zunju de Jubika, Namu Nyendezo, Ten Tu Ring, Tute She Tu Yojin, Go de Rinpoche Chogi, Shechang Dabu Sundan Zone, Nga Zengkwan de Yung Godene, Nye Jao Rinpoche Chisung Kadu Shobadan, Pula Shashen Chebi Angi Re Mato, Jana Jungi Ngala Nanyan Gebade, Manyan Kayo Yimbale, Nanyan Kaya Meche Sungyu.
During the 13 years that Rinpoche spent in prison, his family was allowed to visit him only 6 times. He said, and I'm completely
Gomba Zobi Netsu Tebadan, Sanyi Lende Ne Jisha Temeji Jeme de Nebika, Bernangi Bemitso, Senshu Chembe Tone, Jajun La Ngogodan, Shisho Se Tada Shegubi, kuma shebala tenne ngai sense layon sonshu jede Rinpoche kung gomba zo sen rong kung gi lab chenji shale dang tukung teda muten juchung duto shaju chosen dang muten ne dembala jeka tabi chedu bechen shuju tangcha ja yube kung la jocho nang da na jimba tsu ngaji jocho yun buku shuju yin.
When I first heard of Rinpoche's death, I was paralyzed with shock and grief. I felt helpless and hopeless. At that moment, Tibetans in Tibet, with great courage, stressed the importance of protesting the Chinese government and publicizing the injustice against Rinpoche. They revived my soul and strengthened my resolve to press on, and gave me the courage to continue Rinpoche's great vision for Tibet and his work for the Tibetan people. They gave me the courage to seek justice and to vindicate the truth. I request all those who have supported him to continue your support.
Tuku Tenzin Delek Rinpoche cho gomba zo ne lochi kwa la nyayu tunder Rinpoche in zeje la nganzen dang na yu to ne ari manzo teza kangi manzo shashu sinta na wandir kube Rinpoche in reyo name dang jinju yongji tsabshu de ni taba ne katen cheshu yu tejen teringi zintan de Rinpoche jibu zang memba Rinpoche dan rayu jajungi zangwo de yubi peme yung la tabi nganzen shu yu.
As we approach the one-year anniversary of Rinpoche's death, I thank the National Endowment for Democracy for recognizing his contributions and for honoring him with the Democracy Service Medal. On behalf of his family and his followers, I express my deepest gratitude. This award is not only a recognition of Rinpoche alone, but a tribute to all those Tibetans who languish in Chinese prisons for seeking their freedom and human rights.
Rinpoche ne dang de pyo chiyung gi ne su tanda yoba chantuba mase pyo la chenlu dranyam meba roa mi tatang meba chode rawa meba so chantu pyo na nire jen zara cherin rojen bi kamde pyo mi rawa tatso la jaucho wa nang ne jaucho yueme nangsa tabi cheba zokin dube pyo mi rawa dan pyo chi dedon che ranglu mese puken jad ngachi masen zangji rendo dan mi yun ruche jaucho mutu
What happened to Rinpoche highlights the abysmal situation of repression in Tibet, the lack of legal recourse, and the absence of human rights and religious freedom. Even the simplest action in the global arena makes a big difference to Tibetans, and I urge you to continue supporting our freedom struggle, the cause for which more than 150 Tibetans have self-immolated.
Debi lochoson lakiri, kube netsu kotu ko ransolan zemeji pena, netsu kotu nankin, beju peme chodan, jana de nedu zamba bwani shundan, serin wesegi zubi, Rinpoche ki nedon la lasam nanda ki jecho shekendan, manzo tesa kankin genzen, kar geshime jecho dan roran shuchen nansungwe, tuji chishu. Shisho su yebi jonde dan jonde mayimbi, jecho dan reyo tsamala nikun ribit dene katen chishu junyi.
In the last 13 years, in my effort to gather information on Rinpoche, I have received help from many Tibetans who took great risk to their own lives in order to collect and send information out of Tibet. Likewise, to Chinese writer Wang Leishung and Tibetan poet Tsering Weser and NED President Karl Gershman, I owe my deepest thanks. I'm especially grateful to the many government and non-governmental organizations in exile who did everything they could to campaign for Rinpoche's life and for his release.
Rinpoche lobe de gumba zo de hachangi lophangi rangjen shire, yin yang kungi tukun de mutu ne yu. Pyoji chapsi ne tang kange masir jibar, nga tsu shiyu tatsu mutu ne gola, nga tsu senshu naya chajume, nga tsu tangden dan ranyang shosu mutu chugu, tuji chena.
Tenzin Delek Rinpoche's death was untimely and tragic, but his spirit lives on. We must continue our non-violent struggle to end political repression in Tibet and never give up hope. We must continue to stand on the side of truth, justice, and equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe-la, for those very moving words. Who goes first? Okay, we're really privileged now to have a kind of a intermission between the two award ceremonies, a very special one. And I first want to introduce the senator who is the leader in the Senate and really one of the great leaders around the world in the struggle for human rights and the preservation of Tibetan culture and identity. And it's Senator Dianne Feinstein. And I want to call her now and let her know how grateful we are that she's joined us today, and she's going to give us a few words. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. Your Holiness, let me take you back to 1978. I met my husband, and he said, "You've got to come with me to Nepal." And I had the occasion to do that against my better judgment. We weren't married yet. And he took me to Dharamsala, and I had the pleasure for the first time of meeting His Holiness. And in Dharamsala, at that time, and Richard Gere remembers this, there was a big enclosure. And you spoke to many of your people. And I think the total there were maybe 20,000 people in Dharamsala at that time. And he spoke. And I looked at the faces of the people listening to this man and the degree of impact he had on people. And he's from a very special mold. And his ability to stay on target, his ability to project this middle way, his ability to tell what real happiness is, that it comes from within, and the constancy of the devotion to his people, the Tibetan people, and the enormous frustrations that the Tibetan culture has gone through, particularly because of Chinese resistance. And it's been extraordinarily difficult. In 1991, my husband and I carried a letter from His Holiness to the man who became president of China, Jiang Zemin. And we did so another 3 years later. And in the letter, the Dalai Lama specifically said, "I am not asking for independence. Essentially, I'm asking for the right of my people to believe as my people believe and make some of their own decisions." And so I've just come to have the greatest respect for you, Your Holiness, and I wish you long life. And I know Nancy Pelosi and Richard Gere and others here have been so devoted to your course, and we will continue. So you continue too, and we will, and you are very special in our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein. And again, it's just really wonderful to have you with us today. I think, as everyone knows, Nancy Pelosi, who is the minority leader in the House, is not only a longstanding friend of Ned, but who we really consider to be a member of the Ned family. She's a leading champion of the cause of human rights and democracy in China and for the rights of the Tibetan people, and she's also a very close friend of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. When she visited Tibet last November, she told her Chinese hosts that she was less interested in the monasteries they claimed to have reconstructed than in how China has treated the hearts and the minds of the Tibetan people. It's my really great pleasure today to welcome Nancy Pelosi.
Good afternoon, everyone. What an honor it is to be here with each and every one of you as we appreciate His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It's my honor to share the podium with Senator Feinstein, an old, loyal, dear, and champion of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, as is her husband. Carl Gershman, thank you for your leadership for human rights throughout the world. The connection between His Holiness and the Congress of the United States is a long one, even the connection between His Holiness and the government of the United States in a broader sense. My colleague Martin Frost, who is with us here, is one manifestation of that in his connection to the proceedings here today and the work of the endowment. But let me just say this, because I've been listening, now this is my third day to be with His Holiness on his visit. And I think it's really important for us to stop, to pause, and take a deep breath. We're breathing the same air as His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I say that is important because he is always trying to, while we make all this case about what the Chinese government is doing in Tibet and what they shouldn't do and this and this and this, he's always trying to rid us of our negative attitudes in that regard and to adopt his way of proceeding in a very measured, middle road, nonviolent, of course, principled, values-based, compassion-oriented approach to it all. And that we would be here with His Holiness when the award is being given today to Tenzin Delek Rinpoche, and his cousin accepted the award, is something very special. We should feel all very honored. When we were in Tibet, Carl, we spoke to the Chinese government about Rinpoche. He has been the subject of the hearings of our Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, his fate, his plight, and then our case turned to trying to get his ashes for the family. I mean, it's a sad place for us to go. We thought with his ashes for his family. It is his courage, his devotion to His Holiness, and all that His Holiness stands for. It's marked by, again, that word courage. So many people so courageous. That's what we saw when we went to Tibet. Diane, I want to thank you because we would not have. You remember we were in the meeting with the president of China, and I asked for the visa to go to Tibet when he said, "Go there, see for yourself how things are, that we're not damaging the culture, the religion of people." And Diane made the case and sealed the deal, and we got the visa. Thank you, Diane. I mean, my voice was one thing. It's been relentless. Excuse me. Appropriateness and dignity. Seeing the president today, how thrilling. I mentioned yesterday that His Holiness received a watch when he was a little boy from Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It was something very special. It was a watch with the phases of the moon on it. How appropriate for this the child, the White House, and Democrats and Republicans. One thing that we can all agree on is the wonderfulness of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. Thank you, Your Holiness. Tashi Delek.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for those words. When you mentioned the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, thanks so much, Annette, for being with us. I now want to call upon former Congressman Martin Frost, who is the chairman of the board of the National Endowment for Democracy, who is going to make a special presentation to the Central Tibetan Administration, which is going to be Martin.
Your Holiness. And I know for conducive environment for various institutions of democracy and to take root and grow, such as a lively independent media sector, political parties, and a chamber of commerce. A remarkable measure of the respect that the CTA receives from the Tibetan people is the fact that the Tibetan diaspora community, scattered in over 30 countries across the world, pays a voluntary tax to the CTA. There is no Tibetan IRS. In 2011, the Dalai Lama devolved all of his political powers to the elected representatives of the Tibetan exile community. He said on the occasion, quote, "No system of governance can ensure stability and progress if it depends solely on one person without the support and participation of the people in the political process. One-man rule is both anarchistic and undesirable. We have made great efforts to strengthen our democratic institutions to serve the long-term interests of the 6 million Tibetans, not out of a wish to copy others, but because democracy is the most representative system of governance." Although originally set up to prepare for an imminent return to Tibet, the democratic institutions established in exile now serve as a model for a future political arrangement in Tibet, as well as a pointed contrast to the lack of fundamental freedoms and rights in Tibet. We are very pleased today to have with us members of the CTA, including Sikyong Lobsang Sonje, and I ask him now to join me on the stage to receive, on behalf of the Tibetan people, this symbol of our democratic solidarity. It is a framed copy of the preamble of the United States Constitution, side by side with an excerpt from the preamble of the Constitution of the Central Tibetan Administration, which reads, "His Holiness the Dalai Lama has guided us towards a democratic system of governance to preserve the ancient traditions of spiritual and temporal life, unique to the Tibetans, based on the principles of peace and nonviolence, aimed at providing political, social, and economic rights, as well as the attainment of justice and equality for all Tibetan people. Efforts shall be made to transform a future Tibet into a federal democratic self-governing republic and a zone of peace throughout her 3 regions."
Our beloved and most revered leader, His Holiness the great 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet. It's a great privilege and honor to be here. First of all, I would like to thank Chairman Martin Frost and Board of Directors of NED, and especially Carl Gershman and staff of NED for organizing this event and honoring Central Tibetan Administration for its democratic system, as per the vision of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And it's also fitting that I'm in the presence of very close friends of Tibet and Tibetan people, leader Nancy Pelosi, Richard Gere, and many who are present here today, and Senator Dianne Feinstein just left, because it is the vision of His Holiness the Dalai Lama that we Tibetans followed and implemented his vision to have a democratic system in exile. This is a great achievement on the part of the exiled Tibetans, and the war, having the end of this speech, democracy itself. We elected members of the parliament, so parliament was formed. And in 1963, we had second round of election, and Tibetan women representation was there in 1963. Today, in the 45 strong members of the Tibetan parliament, we have 10 Tibetan women. By percentage, we have more than 20% of women representation in Tibetan parliament. From what I read, in US Congress is a little less than 20%, even though it's led by a leader like Nancy Pelosi. So in that sense, we have beaten the track record of US Congress as far as women representation is concerned. But I think the US might beat us when it comes to selecting or electing its next president, because His Holiness believes if there are more women leaders in the world, it will be a compassionate world. So hopefully, if America selects or elects its next woman president, it will be better, fulfilling His Holiness' belief that it will be a compassionate America. I hope after I finish my term, next Sikyong also will be a woman, so that we can compete equally with the US. And then in 1963, His Holiness dictated rather that we have to have a constitution. So there are a lot of debate and discussion and protest because His Holiness wanted a provision of impeachment. Now, impeachment of himself. He said we have to have an impeachment provision that says that His Holiness Dalai Lama can be impeached by the parliament. That many Tibetans thought was sacrilege, that even to utter that word is going to hell. But His Holiness said no one can be above law. Everybody should be subservient to the constitution, including me. Hence, the provision was kept. So moving forward, in 2001, His Holiness declared himself semi-retired. And in 2011, His Holiness the Dalai Lama decided to separate the church and the state and devolve all his political authority to the elected leadership. Now, in this day and age where you see in Arab world and different parts of the countries, I was just talking to activists, journalists from Azerbaijan, that no leader would like to give up their political power. But here we have His Holiness Dalai Lama in 2011 saying now all the political power has to be devolved and Tibetan people should take responsibilities. And he did it magnanimously, and he says happily, willingly. Thereby, it's fair to say, we all know His Holiness Dalai Lama as a Nobel laureate, but he is also a true democrat. In that sense, today's theme of hope and democracy really reflect and represent His Holiness Dalai Lama. So in 2011, the election that we have is also truly democracy without borders, because Tibetans are scattered in 40 countries. So from Alaska to Australia, from New Delhi to New York, from Brussels to Bandra, Tibetans everywhere vote. And then to vote, actually, you have to pay voluntary freedom tax. If you don't pay that tax, you can't vote. It's a flip side of no representation without taxation. And there is no IRS to implement that. If you don't pay freedom tax, there is no IRS. Still, 90+% of Tibetans pay their taxes to vote. For example, in Ladakh, when it's minus 20 degrees, the ballot boxes are carried on the backs of yaks and donkeys up to the mountains of 4,000 to 5,000 meters high altitude. And the nomads come down from the tents to vote. In Bandra settlement, I think it will be 40 degrees Celsius. It will be humidly hot. Yet Tibetans come out, line up outside the school playground to vote. We all are fulfilling the vision of His Holiness Dalai Lama. And also, as per his guidance, maintaining a moral standard, even in our election campaign and speeches, we are very respectful of each other. For example, the respected Tenzin Delek is here. He was the candidate for 2011 Sikyong position. And believe it or not, we shared taxis together. We shared hotel rooms together. Now imagine in American context, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump sharing bus together. That will save cost though, but that was the level of friendship and friendliness in the debate and the process of our election. Unfortunately, this time, in 2016 election, we were not able to live up to the high moral standards set by His Holiness Dalai Lama. We got reprimanded as well for not living up to his moral standard. But compared to Ted Cruz and Donald Trump campaign rhetoric, we were very, very mild. Still, His Holiness was bit disappointed, for which we apologize. And from these mistakes that we learn moving forward, it will be a truly Buddhist and compassionate democracy. So this democracy in exile is, academically speaking, theoretically impossible, because you have exile and you have democracy. Once you're in exile, your goal is one, to return to your homeland. Your goal is freedom, and one leader is what we focus on. But once you're in exile, instead of one leader, you have to have opposition parties. Instead of one voice, you have to have freedom of speech. So instead of single goal, you have to have diversity. So in academic sense, there is a contradiction between exile and democracy. Yet we implement it as per the vision and guidance of His Holiness Dalai Lama. And the CTA that we have set up, as Chairman Martin Frost said, is perhaps, I'm being a bit un-Buddhist, perhaps one of the most successful refugee organizations, because we run our own schools, educate our own children, subsidized by the Indian government. We run our own health clinics and hospitals. We run our own settlements. And we also run our own Tibetan monasteries and nunneries. We have 265 of them, providing education to 42,000 monks and nuns. 50% of them are from Himalayan region, thereby preserving our culture and religion in exile. Even though China has destroyed 98% of the monasteries and nunneries in the 1960s and 70s, but we have rebuilt and revived Tibetan culture and Buddhism in exile. So along with democracy, we have preserved our culture and identity as per the vision and guidance of His Holiness Dalai Lama. Hence the citation means very special to the Tibetan people inside Tibet, and it's a great privilege to accept it in the presence of His Holiness Dalai Lama and our true friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Sikyong for those gracious words. I just want you to know, Sikyong, that by comparing your campaign to our campaign, you're not setting the highest standard. Okay, I now want to invite His Holiness to come to the platform along with Brian Joseph and the 4 young activists who will engage in the dialogue with the Dalai Lama: Rosa Maria Paya from Cuba, Arzu Gebulayeva from Azerbaijan, Azaz El-Shami from Sudan, and Rami Sood from Jordan. Thank you.
Okay. 그러면
Thank you, Carl. It is my great honor today to moderate a conversation between His Holiness and 4 remarkable youth leaders on hope and democracy. From the grotesque assault on innocent civilians in Orlando over the weekend to the seemingly endless carnage in Syria and other war-torn countries, there's still a sense of perpetual fear. Political leaders all too frequently seek to exploit differences.
In the top.
I know. It's working now? Oh. Better. He has a little more practice than I do. You know, and I actually usually never write something, but today I thought I would. Yesterday, the Washington did. Against our 4 speakers, I'd like to recognize the NED's Tibet team, past and present, Louisa, Wilson, Palki, and Tendor. Although not part of his official duties, Carl, as he is for a select few countries, is also a program officer for Tibet. I want to recognize in particular Palki, not only for her tireless efforts to put this event together, but for her stewardship of our Tibet project. She's a great colleague, and when she leaves the endowment to become the CTA's first female Sikyong, none of us will be surprised. We will begin this afternoon's conversation with a series of questions from our speakers on 3 themes: maintaining hope and tolerance in the face of repression and hate, religion and peace, and fostering youth leadership under difficult conditions. If time permits, we will then turn it open to questions from the audience. Now let me introduce our 4 speakers. Azaz El-Shami is a Sudanese human rights and gender equality advocate. Azaz works with Malam Darfur Peace and Development, an organization devoted to rebuilding war-torn areas of Darfur and achieving sustainable peace for the region. She advocates for internet access and is an analyst for Freedom House's Freedom on the Net report. Azaz also develops and facilitates trainings on nonviolent resistance, governance, and peace building in conflict and post-conflict areas. Rami Saoud, on my far right, is a Jordanian activist and executive director of Success Network 21, an organization that promotes community leadership among young people in the Middle East and Africa. Prior to his role, Rami worked for the Center for Civil Society and Development to develop programs, activities, and projects to serve young people and to promote their participation in the development process. In 2014, Rami was a Hereford Youth Fellow at the National Endowment for Democracy, where he worked on a project on the role of youth in social change and process. Now this is a tough one, so you have to bear with me. Arzu Gaibulayeva, and I've been working on that one for a few days, is a journalist from Azerbaijan who reports on human rights and democracy issues. She's worked as a co-director at the Imagine Center for Conflict Transformation, an organization that promotes peace building in conflict-torn societies, and is the managing editor of The Neutral Zone, a platform for alternative voices from Armenia and Azerbaijan. She writes for Al Jazeera, Global Voices, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and the bilingual weekly Argos, among many others. Our final speaker is Rosa Maria Paya, a young human rights and democracy activist from Cuba. She is the head of the Cuba Divide campaign, which calls for the Cuban government to issue a plebiscite asking whether the Cuban people would like to hold free and fair elections for the first time in over 60 years. Since 2015, she has served as president of the Latin American Youth Network for Democracy, where she coordinates a series of pro-democracy and human rights events aimed at strengthening, defending, and consolidating democracy throughout Latin America. Well, with that, now we're going to turn to our questions, and the first one will be posed by Azaz.
Your Holiness, I'm very honored to see you today. My first question is, what is spirituality to you? And a follow-up question with that.
Spirituality. Of course, firstly, let me make very clear the understanding this English word. I think may not be very correct. So, I usually consider spirituality. I think spirituality with belief. Or without belief. So now here spirituality, real sort of the essence is homogeneous. You can see all the major religious tradition, their main message is love. And in order to practice love more effectively, more successfully, you see, they also, all these teachings, traditions, teach us tolerance, forgiveness. So that's the spirituality with faith, with religious faith. Then another level of spirituality without faith. That means the infant child, no faith, but they already, you see, they appreciate their mother's affection. They themselves also, you see, showing towards their mother some tremendous sort of closeness feeling. So that's, I feel, the spirituality or religions exist only among human beings, not other animals. So I think basic, the real essence of all religion is that kind of quality. So I consider like that. So therefore, I fully committed to promote, whether believer or non-believer, we are social animals. We are human beings. So our life starts with mother's tremendous affection. We survived with that kind of affection, care, love. So, compassion, warm-heartedness, is, I think, the very basis of our life. So, like that.
Can I have a follow-up question?
So we'll work around. Arzu?
Yeah. I actually have a question on hate.
You might have to help her too.
Is it working now? No? Yes? No? Yes. Okay. I thought I had it on. Sorry. My question is about hate. Back home, I was defamed. I was called a traitor. And there was a lot of hate coming from the people. Some people wanted to see me dead. I got death threats, and motivated, and also afraid of how to go on personally, but also how to deal with this hate and how to teach people to actually not be so hateful. What would be your advice?
가자. I think hate, anger, these, yes, part of our mind, part of our emotion. But in human life, I think the dominant emotion is love, not hatred. I think at the time of birth, even I think before birth, mother, you see, mothers, due to certain sort of reasons or factor, you see, develop too much anger, I think very much negative effect to unborn child. Then after birth, if mother full of hatred, then we'll die, we will die, we never survived. So, their love, compassion is the real dominant sort of emotion, whole our life. Hatred, something like short visitors come and create a lot of problem and then dissipate. So I think, and then again, I think the love, compassion, there is sufficient reasons. So through thinking more reasons, these emotions can strengthen. Can be strengthened. Or hatred, some temporary reasons, but no sort of profound way. No sound,
no sound and stable basis.
You see, those people who hate you, for the moment, they have that kind of feeling. After 1 year, they may praise you. So this is a hate. It's something very temporary, very short, like that. That's my view. So, judging these things, love, compassion is much more stronger than anger. For temporary anger, you see, if someone, you see, develop angry towards you and carry some gun, then better to run. Run away. You see, real danger come, and compassion, then foolish.
That's fair enough. Rosa Maria?
His Holiness, it's my honor to be in your presence. It's okay?
Yes, okay.
Thank you. My question is about forgiveness and justice. My question is about forgiveness and justice.
Forgiveness and justice.
Yeah. I come from a totalitarian regime that have caused a lot of suffering to the Cuban people. I have lived that suffer in my family, and I know that the Tibetan community have lived that also. But I want to believe that we are commitment in a project that is in the direction of building something new, of building a real democracy, of building a new social contract based also on compassion, or at least based on humanity. But how can we combine these two important factors that I feel that we need? Justice and forgiveness.
Justice? My viewpoint is the very meaning of justice is because of the protect, because of the happiness, I feel. The well-being. So forgiveness, you see, someone, you see, done something bad for you, or something usually, you see, may create anger. Now, forgiveness, real meaning is you should not let anger. That is the real meaning of forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean you accept others' wrongdoing. So as far as their action, some wrongdoing, unjust wrongdoing, sometimes we need the counter sort of measure, but without anger. So countermeasure, and meantime, some kind of forgiveness can go together.
Thank you.
If my view wrong, then make a correction.
Okay. So the second topic we were going to talk about,
yes,
religion and peace. And the first one who's going to ask the question is Rami on my far right.
Your Holiness, it's a great honor to be with you today. We live in a world facing one of the hardest time in this century. Conflict, war, violence everywhere. And you know, Your Holiness, the the religion have important role in the people's life everywhere. And now the extremism groups, the people in power, even the governments using the fuels for their interest or for as a fuel for the conflict, for the hate, for the violence. And I believe this is not the original role for the religion. It's the source of love, of peace, of hope, of diversity and unity. How we can restore the role of religion today within this, suffering, this conflict, this war, and what's your message for the youth today?
Whether we accept religion or not, up to individual. Once we accept, we should be serious. Then all religions teach us practice of love. Christianity. I think because of the main practice is, I think, love. So and because of Islam. You see, I think really some of my sort of friends, some Muslims, you see, they say the genuine practitioner of Islam must extend their love towards entire creation of Allah. So your temporary, your enemy, also creature of Allah. So you must respect. You must love. So the genuine, I think I mentioned this, the jihad. The real meaning of jihad is combat your own destructive emotions, such as anger, such as hatred. That's the real meaning of jihad. Jihad, not meaning like this. So therefore, I really feel if you seriously practice, follow the sort of advice or sort of teachings of your tradition, all have same potential. This is my belief. And then I think briefly I mentioned after lunch, there are different philosophy. Yes, in the philosophical field, there's big, because of that, differences. I think basically two groups. One group believe creator, that's theistic religion. Another group, non-theistic, such as Sangha, one of the ancient Indian sort of tradition, religious tradition, there is Sangha philosophy. The Sangha philosophy, within Sangha philosophy, two groups. One Sangha philosophy accepts creator. One Sangha philosophy, no idea, no concept of creator. Then Jainism, no concept of creator. Then Buddhism, no concept of creator, but rather we ourselves as a creator. So self-creation. The rest of the old major religious tradition, see, their basic faith is concept of creator, God, like that. So there is differences. And within, even within Buddhist tradition, you see, there are 4 different schools of thought. It may not be familiar to these audience or to you. The Vibhashik, Sotantik, Chittamantra, Madhyamika. So these 4 major different philosophical views, school of thought, there is big differences. But taught by the same teacher, that's Buddha. So that shows, you see, it is necessary among his own disciple or follower. You see, because of different mental disposition, so need different philosophical views in order to help or in order to strengthening their practice of love, compassion, like that. So therefore, the different philosophy, same purpose, to strengthening our sort of belief or our sort of enthusiasm or practice of love. The Christianity or because those theistic religion, so when we describe God, nobody say God full of anger. Nobody say that. Always is God infinite love. So that's our because our Creator. So we are created by such sort of God, infinite love. So that sort of philosophical views, very, very helpful to strengthening your practice of love. So different philosophy there, same purpose, no problem. Then cultural aspect, that is, you see, most of these major religious traditions, you see, develop, I think, between 3,000, 2,000 years. So at that time, the society sort of system or culture system is more or less feudal system. So therefore, you see, and then the existing sort of circumstances around that place also makes, you see, different cultural aspect. For example, India, when Jain founder come, I think about 2,700 or 600 like that. So at that time, immense animal sacrifice there. So even it affect the farmers' economy. So such period, the Jain master come. You see, he particular sort of emphasis non-violence and should not kill any animal. Must respect all form of life. So because of the circumstances, you see, need special emphasis about not killing animal. Buddha, I think after that, Buddha come. Buddha also, you see, stressed that way. So then, I feel, of course, we need further sort of study, investigation. I feel when Muhammad come, that area is a more nomadic life. No sort of, unlike I think because of the farmland, there is some certain rules, and nomads usually is less. In Tibet also, I think the nomad people sometimes more, we got the impression more lawlessness like that. So therefore, you see, because of their circumstances, you see, it is necessary to emphasize law. So Sharia law come. That's my view. So that cultural aspect, and then many religious institutions very much related with feudal system. So feudal system gone. Now everybody talks democracy, the rule by the people. So therefore, you see, these certain cultural aspects which influenced by existing society sort of system, that is the feudal system, that part I think we have to modify or we have to change. Even this Buddhist monks' rule, basically quite democratic sort of way, but still seems to see we need some modification. So some occasion I express to those Buddhists from different Buddhist countries. So certain aspect we have to sort of modify, like that. So that's my view. And then, so therefore, you see, the environment really makes differences. Now, for example, as far as a Muslim is concerned, Indian Muslim, hardly, you see, no cause of the was the cases, the fighting Sunni and Shia. And then, not only that, the Indians or the Muslim, I think very good relation. The Buddhigaya, many shopkeepers are Muslim. So customer, Buddhist. So very close, good relations. So circumstances make that way. So therefore, the Indian Muslims and Muslim in Malaysia, Muslim in Indonesia, and Muslim in Arab country, and within Arab, I think Muslim in Jordan seems a little different than some Muslims in those countries were more or less isolated. So then there's more hardliners because lack of contact with other religious traditions. So circumstances, they make environment makes the differences. So I think absolutely wrong Muslim due to certain sort of bad behavior. Oh, because of that, we generalize whole Muslim is something wrong. It's absolutely wrong. No proper sort of reason. So the other day I just expressed the Muslim terrorist. That very word I think wrong. Simply say terrorist, okay. Muslim terrorist. And already now in Burma, Buddhist terrorist also there. So Christian terrorist, because of Jew terrorist. So then sound not nice. So all these religions never taught how terrorist work. But these carried by individual. So they are terrorists, not religious people. So it is wrong to describe Muslim terrorist or Buddhist terrorist or Hindu terrorist. I think wrong. I feel like that. So I think, as I already mentioned, we should be serious. We Buddhists also, some Tibetan Buddhists also, why, including Lama, right? Or contentment. But their own private life need a lot of things, a lot of money like that. So hypocrisy. So not serious enough. If we really believe what we teaching or preaching, you should implement. One of the Buddhists university rule,
one of the precepts of a teacher is that you should be setting an example for what you preach.
Thank you. We have one more question on the same theme from Azaz.
Yes, Your Holiness. You said in one of the interviews before that achieving sustainable peace can only come through empowering youth. But as we see now, more youth are joining the ranks and files of radicalized group. I hope they watch us. If they were, what would you tell them? Because I feel like it's a lack of hope. What would you tell them?
I think temporary, immediate, I think difficult. As the whole society, you see, there is some kind of sort of culture or way of life, always talking money and power. Not much talk about inner value. So generation, and then education system, existing education system itself, not much talk about inner value. So whole generation come through that kind of education and remain a society where more materialistic way of life, and then difficult. Therefore, causing I feel different circumstance will not bring that way dialogue or different views, different interests. Yeah, have to solve through talk, not by gun. That's, I think, if we follow the 20th century sort of see concern now. So
we can see charismatic leaders as the leaders for
anger, temporary, will not remain forever. Love, so long human beings remain on this planet, love remain. That's my feeling. I think Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan social. No, I think right from the beginning, not this kind of situation. Just come and go.
Very briefly. Yeah.
That's it. You will go. Oh, that's complicated. I don't know. But the tragedy then, yaus peju chevina. She takata milralesha. She tragedy the peju pasu draw shukches che. Took chevina. And go critically, good is in Mako Barba. Social legat on any good Kazu Lutu Mangruchi, any Kazu Pugay, General Sorve, Lutu Mangruchi in any British angle.
It's a complicated question, and am I right in understanding that your question was that in contrast to the past, these days, because of the technology and social media and so on, the leadership seems to be more horizontal.
Yes.
And if that is the correct understanding, His Holiness was saying that in any case, in movements, leaderships are not a point of top-down. Leaderships tend to emerge bottom-up as a result of individuals' action and behavior. And therefore, one thing about the social media and the connectedness is that you can share your views and your ideas more horizontally, which then draws attention of a much larger people. And that way, you will be able to connect. The movement will be able to emerge in a more kind of horizontal way.
Thank you. We have one final question from the panels before we open it up to the audience. Rosa Maria?
Yes, thank you. Holiness, I'm coming from a country which government is trying to make some changes just to change the face they have in front of the world. And some analysts and experts are starting to talk about Cuba could be following the Chinese model. But some of us think that that's not a model of hope, or at least it's not of the exile. Almost the 20% of the Cuban population live in the exile. You have a very, if I could say, successful experience in the exile, with a very strong community, and a beautiful history of resistance. If I could qualify it like that, what is your message, especially for the young people?
Second part, I think we can learn the refugee from Vietnam, and I think mainly I noticed the Vietnamese refugee. Wherever they live, they carry preservation of their own identity, their own culture, including their own faith. So I was very much impressed. Then we also, oh yes, so the community where you live, and then you see, try to carry your own certain sort of unique cultural heritage, these things, try to preserve and remain unity, with unity. That's very important. Then the kasa, the first part, that the Kaurda, I don't know. They copy Chinese model. The Chinese model itself, not so difficult. I think those Cuban people, Cuban leaders, I think visit China and spend longer time and study, not just relying on official sort of version, presentation, like that. So after all, I think democracy is there. I think there are some drawbacks in democratic system. In spite that, the democratic system is the best system. After all, I always sort of expressing 7 billion humans was the best way to rule by people in the country is democratic system. That's my view. So I think ultimately, world, there's no other sort of choice except, you see, go a democratic system. That's how I feel. And then also is much depend on education, people, public, better education, then gain more sort of experience. Then a healthy democratic system can develop. But poor education, then sometimes it's difficult. So I think the dictatorship in certain period may be helpful. So long the leader did themselves more honest, truthful, really thinking, serving people, then okay. But then eventually, only way is elected leadership, ruled by elected leadership, and the people, because of the leadership, accountable
to the people.
To the people, and ultimately people have the power. Right? Professor Singala is already mentioned. You say, I voluntarily, happily, you see, cease the 4th century old tradition. Dalai Lama automatically become head of both temple and kasa, spirituality. Now that ended voluntarily, happily, proudly. So sometimes I feel this sort of system or habit started by 5th Dalai Lama. So now that ended by supposedly 14th Dalai Lama. I seized that. So whether 5th Dalai Lama agree or not, sometimes I doubt. So in any way, you see, there is no danger 5th Dalai Lama reappear. So I have freedom.
Okay, I think we have about time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Can you please try to be relatively brief so that we can get 2 in? Let's start here.
His Holiness, I'm a Uyghur from East Turkestan. The situation of Uyghur people and Tibetan people is very similar when it comes to Chinese repressive policies. And under President Xi Jinping, Chinese government intensified its repression in East Turkestan, and they arrested and imprisoned, sentenced to life imprisonment, language, tradition, and religion, to destroy and eliminate Uyghur people as a entity.
Since I think maybe 70s, you see, we developed one small committee representative of Uyghur with Tibetan, Inner Mongolian, and later one from Manchurian, So you see, try to carry some work closely and exchange our experiences, these things. So, some occasion, I mentioned to Uyghur friends, firstly, although sometimes the circumstances is something unavoidable, but basically should carry your struggle non-violent way, no matter how difficult it is. Otherwise, you see, the hardliner easily suppress. So try to avoid violence. East Turkestan, the separate, independent, is difficult. So better remain within the People's Republic of China, and there are, among the Han people, there are many Muslim approach, entirely based on non-violent way. That's my view. But detail, you have to think. I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Recently, I think last year, I met some Chinese scholars who visited Uyghur area. They told me.
So please join me in thanking His Holiness.
Thank you. Thank you.
My family is here, and they wanted to give a gift to you. Yes. Can everyone please stay in the room until His Holiness leaves? So.
Go ahead. Together. Go ahead. Solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. There's so many people ask me